Hello, biology students. Now we're going to talk about plants, kingdom Plantae, or plants just in general. Let's go. So when we think about plants, there's a lot of different things we're going to talk about. But specifically, we have to remember that plants are eukaryotes. They're in the big domain eukarya. And they're multicellular. That part's really important. They reproduce in two different ways. They can make clones asexually, or they can reproduce sexually, making new types of combinations of genetics. Plants have cell walls. Compared to other things with cell walls, their cell wall is made of a specific molecule called cellulose. They're autotrophs, meaning they make their own food, and we know they do this through photosynthesis. We even know the equation. They have lots of major parts, things that we might have heard of, like roots and stems and leaves. Vascular is like the equivalent of the plant's bloodstream, but because they don't have blood, a lot of times it's just water and sugar that are moving up and down the plant. In their leaf, there are a couple major parts that sometimes we need to know. The stomata, or stoma, is the opening that allows CO2 and oxygen to go in and out. The thing that guards that opening is called a guard cell. It surrounds the opening, and sometimes we don't want CO2 to be released, to be entering, or oxygen to be released. And then there's also a waxy covering. So this can be bigger and smaller in different types of plants that prevents water loss. So in a place that's like a desert, the cuticle is very thick on a plant. So here's an idea of what we just talked about. This picture shows this opening here, and around the opening are guard cells. The opening itself is called a stomata. And again, it allows oxygen to come out and CO2 to go in for the most part. All right, that's the same thing looking closed. The guards have closed the gate. There are a couple different major categories of plants. For our class, we just need to know the basics. These words sometimes show up on the SOL in the final exam, but you don't need to know all the super details. But the most simple type of plant is called a moss. All right, we can see it's very similar to an ancestor, the green algae that's a protist. All right, and then comes ferns. All right, ferns are things that have a little bit more structure to them. These are the fancy words for them, brophyte and pterophyte. Next comes cone-bearing plants like pine cones. Sometimes we call these gymnosperms. And then we have flowering plants, angiosperms. So all the way from very simple, getting a little bit more complex, and then we start having things that actually can produce complex, unique genetics sexually, like cones and flowers. Those are more recent in evolutionary history. We can see that from this cladogram. Very cool. You only need to know the basics here. You don't need to know everything. All right? So we also need to know, well, how do different types of things like pollen, which are like the plant's sperm, how does it move to go to a new plant and get to the mommy part of the plant? And so the way that pollen will move, which is the plant sperm, is it can move through wind pollination. This is pretty cheap because the wind just does it for us as a plant, but it doesn't have good direction, right? The wind's going to take it wherever the wind wants. Versus a lot of animals do the pollination for the plant, like bees and birds. This can be kind of expensive because the plant has to look very attractive to the bee or bird, but it is more likely to get to the exact plant it wants to get to. Other things we need to know about: once the sperm or the pollen gets to the egg, when we combine them, just like in a human, it's still called fertilization. But this time it's pollen as the sperm, and it goes onto a part of the plant called the stigma that's kind of sticky. And it lands on that part, right? And the pollen is usually on these things called stamen, anthers, right? That's the male part. And the pollen will go down the stigma, and it'll find where the eggs are, right? Eggs have a fancy word for plants called ovule. And that sounds a lot like the word ovary. Same word for humans, ovaries, where the eggs are. And when they combined, the pollen and the egg, called an ovule, it makes a seed. Same types of seeds that you know of as seeds. All right, and what's really cool is those eggs then become seeds, and the ovary, this outer casing, can become a fruit, like an apple, or something like that, or a tomato, or zucchini. Yes, you are eating eggs and ovaries a lot. Really weird. So plants have male and female parts. Super weird. Well, how then do the seeds get places? Well, seeds get places by wind, like a dandelion. The seed has to be lightweight. They can get places through water, like coconuts are actually floatable, and they can move through the water. They can move by plants, by going onto an animal, such as being eaten through fruit, and then the animal poops it out, or by attaching to the animal because it's sticky or has like spikes called burrs. And why do we care about plants? We talk about plants so much. Why do we even care? Well, because they do a lot of stuff for us, right? We rely on them for oxygen. We can remember our photosynthesis equation. We get food from them, lots of different types. We get medicine from them, like aspirin. And we get tons of resources, like our homes are made of plants, and our clothes are made of plants, and all sorts of things. So plants, super important, really much more diverse than we usually think they are. And we will practice more about plants in class. Great job, guys.